Most mac and cheese is stodgy, dense, and one-dimensional. This version from a 3 Michelin-star chef solves all those issues. So we're gonna start with macaroni. You can use other different shapes of pasta, but it is more traditional. Whack it into your boiling water, just lightly salted. And then we're just gonna cook this until it's parboiled. This is the main point of difference of this recipe. So instead of using a bechamel, which is completely the traditional way of doing it, chicken stock, which is gonna add a really nice depth. This is classic Heston, slightly different. And this is served at his Michelin-star restaurant called the Hinds Head, which is adjacent to the Fat Duck. And he wanted to basically preserve British pub culture as something to really shout about. So there's loads of traditional pub dishes that you would get, but reimagined in a Michelin way. And this is a really good recipe because it's super accessible. It's actually really easy. It's probably just as easy as making the original. But the key little differences that he does makes for a much lighter and interesting mac and cheese. So if you buy shop bought stock, you might need to reduce it slightly. If you're using stock cubes, just make sure you use enough. You could use 2 or 3. You basically want it to taste already like a really nice sort of light chicken soup. And then we're going to infuse it with rosemary as it comes up, small amount of thyme, and then some black peppercorns, just for about 25 minutes. Once it comes up to 85 degrees. Sort of combined with the cheese of the gruyere that we're going to use later, this is going to give it a really beautiful sort of like aromatic sort of finish in the background. Macaroni has only been on the boil for around about 5 minutes. Definitely what would be considered like very al dente. Notice we use a lot of water because we basically want to keep it on a rolling boil when it hits. Right, now pass this off, then add that back into your pan. No need to save any of the pasta water in this recipe. And then just a touch of olive oil. If you don't put the oil in there, as it kind of cools down, the starch in the pasta will stick together. The next stage is to reduce some of our white wine. Any sort of white wine will do. You really want to take the alcohol off it. Continue to reduce it until you have something that's a little bit sweet and a little bit acidic, and that'll help balance out the mac and cheese. The thing this recipe does is you get intensity and depth from the stock. You get a little bit of acidity here. And then to be quite honest, you get a bit of trash because we're going to use American cheese as well. And it kind of needs to be a little bit trashy, but this is just a more elegant version of any mac and cheese that you'll find on the internet. So thank you very much, Heston. The gift that keeps on giving. Okay, so our wine is reduced probably by half. I'm just going to keep it going on a slightly lower heat, going with your chicken stock. And this might look a bit strange at this stage, but bear with me. It all makes sense in the end. And what we're sort of looking for here with this stock is a nice bit of sweetness from the wine, tiny touch of acidity, a little bit of meatiness from the chicken stock. But ultimately it's should be like the perfect vessel to carry that cheese. In terms of cheese, a little bit of gruyere. So I prefer to use gruyere than cheddar because you get a bit more meltiness. And what we really want to do with this is just save a little bit back for the end. And these are going to add some like cheesy little melty nuggets. Then this we're going to grate. American cheese we're going to chiffonade. And then we're going to mix in at the end some cream cheese. Again, really nice hack rather than using bechamel because it's got a really good amount of acidity in cream cheese, and that kind of cuts through all the fat from this cheese as well. So American cheese, I'm just going to slice. This actually isn't in Heston's recipe. Shock horror. I just think it adds this like really nostalgic sort of flavor. There is no one in the world who doesn't think that American cheese is a beautiful sort of nostalgic nod. And then you mix it with your corn flour. Now this is quite an unusual step. So normally with corn flour, what you do is you'll mix a little bit of corn flour with water. You basically don't need the water, and it's a really nice way of incorporating it whilst the cheese melts. So this is going to thicken the sauce. The most important thing of using corn flour is with a bechamel, even a really well-made bechamel, it's still heavy. So just with corn flour, adding it to sauces, it gives it a more velvety texture. Okay, so our stock is nice and warm. I'm just going to bring it back up to about 80 degrees. It doesn't need to be boiling, and I'm going to add in some cheese, and you'll see it just slowly start to melt and slowly start to thicken. Thing about Heston as well, basically, if Heston publishes a recipe, I know from first-hand experience, they approach things in such a scientific way. So every single variation of this recipe will have been tested at least 5 or 6 times by not just like chefs, but like food scientists. They are the most consistent recipes on earth. So what will happen is the cheese slowly melts, the corn flour sort of start to hydrate, and then your sauce will naturally start to thicken. The other thing is as well, if you have like shocking experience with making bechamels, this is so much more consistent. Corn flour is a natural sort of thickener and stabilizer. So there's basically no way that this can even split. And you can already see the gloss and the sheen that you get from corn flour. Continue to cook the corn flour out on a very, very gentle heat while stirring for around about 4 or 5 minutes. After that, we're gonna let it cool, and then we're gonna add in our cream cheese. Whilst that's cooking, we're just gonna prepare the last stage, which is just a little bit of butter going in there.
Is it essential?
You what? Is that too much? I'll just stir a little bit less.
Yeah.
So just added in a touch of butter into there. So I'm just gonna allow that to just lightly brown. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna toast a little bit of panko breadcrumbs. You can use other breadcrumbs. This is just some like light panko. And then we're gonna mix that with a little bit of sage and some thyme. So we're just gonna chiffonade that up. So the reason we're adding a pangrattato is just because there's always a balance that no one really thinks about when they're cooking mac and cheese, which is in order to get that sort of crispy top, you have to knacker the pasta and overcook it. But we don't want to do that. We want to keep it really nice, and basically you want to keep the pasta really nicely cooked. And then the top and the pangrattato is just there to add a nice textural element. So I'm just whacking my sage into the foaming butter, and it'll lightly start to foam. And then as soon as it does, just whack in the rest of your panko. You can add, if it needs it, just a touch of oil, which will stop the butter from burning too much. So really with this, we're just looking to get it really nice and aromatic and toasty, but the rest of the browning will happen in the oven. So you can see it doesn't take long to start caramelizing. So just turn it down onto the lower setting and just keep it ticking over. I'm just gonna season it as well with a touch of flaky salt, a good hit of pepper. And now our sauce base is kind of finished doing its thing. That corn flour's done its job. The sauce is thick, but not too thick, but it does trace the back of a spoon quite nicely. So once these crumbs have started to go golden, if you're using a nice heavy pan like this, just turn it off. It'll continue to toast from the residual heat. What we want to do is take out a small portion of the sauce, then add in our cream cheese. If you skip this stage, what will essentially happen is you'll get lots of little tiny micro lumps of cream cheese in your sauce. I always like to add a little bit of Dijon, not in the recipe. Importantly, Heston doesn't add Dijon into his, but for me, I always think that it really nicely balances out a mac and cheese again. So you've got this, basically you get this really nice sort of, what we call it, a slurry. And then we're gonna add that back in stages into our sauce base. And what we wanna do is, before we sort of check and adjust the seasoning of the sauce, always a good idea to add the sauce to the pasta first. So the pasta has already been seasoned slightly because we used the salt in the liquid when we cooked it, and then just bring the whole thing together. And as it cooks, just remember, at this stage, it's gonna absorb more of that sauce. So you almost want it to be over moist at this stage, because it will definitely thicken up as the starch in the pasta continues to cook whilst it bakes. My last kind of trick is a little bit more of the gruyere, a really nice dice. These little nubbins of cheese are gonna add in the perfect cheese pull. So going into a dish. Now this is the traditional American way to do it, popularized by Thomas Jefferson actually at a dinner party. So baked in a dish. I think this is sort of, secures it as one of those family favorites. If this goes down in the middle of the table, you know you're onto a winner. You do kind of want it to be nice and deep because you want to try and maintain as much of that moisture as possible. If it's too thin and too shallow, the noodles will slightly overcook. You'll get basically a dry consistency. So the deeper it is, the more it'll hold onto that moisture as it just finishes the cooking stage in the oven. But it's a really simple way to give a bit more texture, a tiny bit more salt on top before it goes in. Okay, and then it's gonna go in the oven, 180 degrees for around about 15 to 20 minutes. I really love to see on a mac and cheese, it should be loose enough, the sauce, to bubble and kind of like trying to edge its way over that pangrattato. But it's bubbling all the way around, and that crumb is just getting really beautiful and golden. So as soon as that crust is finished, we want to take it out. Right, there she be. 15, 20 minutes in the oven, and we've already got this really nice crust around the outside that should just be lightly caramelized and crispy on the outside. That's exactly what you want. That nice cheese pull that's going to come from all those little bits of gruyere. You can taste all the herbs. Nice bit of acidity, nice and sweet. It's so much sort of more complex than just standard mac and cheese. Slightly different technique. It takes about the same amount of time as to make a normal mac and cheese. It's not overly complicated. It's not overly expensive. but the results are way better.